guys, this is ALECTO with the very first video of a small series that I decided to make after I got a bunch of requests on Instagram. The whole series will be about making melodies and how I do my stuff, and this one will be covering the component of processing and mixing as opposed to the component of composition, which is why I'll be using a MIDI, and I'll also be skipping the part of arrangement. So basically, the way I do my melodies is that I'll have between 3 and 4 different sounds playing. The first sound is the main sound, and it's usually either a bell or a key sound. In this case, it's a bell from Atmosphere Bank. The second sound is usually a sound with much more movement but less body, which is there to give the whole melody more life. In this case, I'm using cubic zirconia. The third sound is usually a flute or a lead synth, or like a brass or something like that, which is supposed to play the melody on top of the chord progression that is being played in the first two instruments. And the fourth I haven't added yet, because I usually add the fourth one after everything else is done, since the fourth is only some additional texture, and that is usually a vocal chop or a breath from like exhale or something like that. So yeah, when I first started making samples primarily, I wanted to achieve that old vintage detune sound that I've been doing recently, and for that I took a look at the signal flow charts that illustrate the way people used to process audio when they only had analog gear. For that, I will show you guys an illustration that will help you understand it better. So what I did is basically take that same concept, or take the same chain of effects, and applied it to the workstation here as best as I could. What's most important when using plugins and this effect chain as such is that you don't overdo it, meaning that you're not supposed to like push the drive all the way up or whatever, because it will not sound good. It's about the additive effects of all these individual plugins all doing or like adding a little color and saturation to the sound. Without any further ado, I'll show you guys what the melody sounds like this without any processing, and then I'll go ahead and mix it down. So on the first channel, I'll be using a preset for the key sound, and it's called White Piano, and what it does, it basically, with this switch you can switch whether you want to edit the left and right signal or the middle and the side. And what it does is that it adds so it pushes up the gain of the middle frequencies of the side signal here, and it also boosts some frequencies of the middle signal, but I'm gonna turn that down a bit because I don't want to boost the middle signal too much. I want to make it wider, so I want to be boosting the sides only. For the compressor, I will oh, actually let me show you guys the effect of this first. This is without it. This is with it. It's a very slight difference, but if you listen closely, you can tell that it's slightly sharper and clearer. And also, it has a bit more body to it. For the compressor, I like to compress it a bit, but I make sure that it does not, reduce the signal by more than 3 decibels. In this case, it's like peaking at like 2.5, which is alright. And by default, this analog thing will be on either 50 or 60. And I'm gonna be switching it off because what it does, it's basically just noise, and I want one layer of noise, and that I will be adding with the last plugin here. The equalizer I'll be using is following. I'll just use the feature they have here to cut out frequencies. You know, I'll add a high pass and a low pass filter, and cut it to the point where I'm losing frequencies that I actually want in the sound itself. So I can solo out the frequencies that I'm cutting out with this. So this frequency already adds some character to the sound, so I want to drag it back up a bit. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Sounds about right like this. So and at last I'm going to cut some of these frequencies out. As you can see here, this one really pokes out and you can hear that, and I don't want it to. So what I'm gonna do here is that I'm gonna turn up the Q and cut it by like 4 decibels. I'm also gonna roll some of these off like this. And at last I'm going to add some wobble and some noise here. Around 10% should be fine. Alright, so on the second instrument that I just routed to channel 4, because the second one would mute itself for whatever reason, I put the exact same effects as I said before, and this time I'll be using the snare preset, as it brings out it gives the frequencies around 7K more gain, and those frequencies are give this sound in particular more character. I'm gonna let y'all listen to it. That's with the effect. This without. Alright, with the compressor, I'm doing the exact same thing as before. I'm gonna compress it, but not overdo it. Then I'm going to do the exact same thing as before with I'm just not gonna cut anything out in this case. I'm just gonna cut the lows and not the highs, since that sparkling kind of texture is reliant on those frequencies up here even. Oh, I forgot to turn off the analog. Alright. Sounds about right like this. And at last I'm going to put some detune on this also. Some detune. And now that I did this, I am going to mix those two and do the leveling. Right, and finally, I will mix the synth, the lead synth, and for that I'll have to loop this part. And I might actually change the sound of this one. I'm not sure yet though. Alright. I'm going to add the vocal preset, and I'm going to boost the 12K frequency. And I think I'm going to skip the compressor since it's not really necessary with this sound, I feel like, as it does not have such a high dynamic range. And I'm going to add the exact same beat tune as before and cut out some mud here. Okay. Alright, this is the deepest note. Now I'm gonna just listen to the whole thing and decide whether or not I want to keep the sounds like this. At this stage, I also decide if I want to use fourth elements or not. I would say that as it sounds right now, it's kind of empty. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna add the fourth instrument here. And for that, I think that I'm gonna use another one of my sounds from my Omnisphere bank. Alright. Okay, so now that I've found a melody and a preset that I like, I'm going to mix it. And for this vocal, I decided to choose another preset named Vocal 1 to add a little to it, and I'm also gonna put the drive on by not too much though, just slightly. And on top of that, I'm going to cut out the lows of this, and I'm also going to add some detune, and in this case I'm going to add more than on the keys, because it's a background sound and it does not it's not really, it's not going to affect the pitch of the whole sample too much if I edit this. So by doing this, I'm going to make it stick out a bit more. So okay, see what it sounds like, this. I'm not really 100% content with the way it sounds right now, so I'm either going to add a second key sound with a little bit more body and low frequencies, or I'm going to work with echo here. I'm going to just try out what works for me here. This sounds right, but I'm going to drag this down a bit. Alright, this sounds much better already, but I'm gonna add one more sound because it still sounds too hollow. I also feel like the lead synth didn't fit there, so what I'm gonna do here is that I'm gonna use a bell instead for the lead sound. So let's go for, try this one. This sounds much better already. So now that the melody itself is done, I can go ahead and master it. And what I do for that is that I add a compressor, and I once again look at the meter and make sure that it doesn't go over a reduction of 3 decibels. I turn off the analog, and I make sure that the time constant is at either 1 or 6. And at last I'm adding another tape machine to give it a little more color. And what I do here is that I don't overdo it again. and I'm just gonna add a slight, let's go for like 3 decibels here, and also I make sure that this is a 2-track since it's a master, and it makes the effect more subtle. And the tape type is going to be FG456 because it sounds a bit smoother in this case, and the speed is going to be 30 IPS, as 15 would have too much of a strong effect on the sound, and it will make it sound overly saturated to me. So that's what it sounds like.